As a church, there's several organisations that work in different parts of the world that we support with a little bit of money and a little bit of prayer. And Andy's organisation is one of those, but you've not been here before. We've not met you before.
No.
It's great to have you. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here. It really is.
Andy works for an organisation called Novo Communities, and they make beer mats.
We actually did.
And so you've all got one on your seats. If you're on Zoom, I'm sorry, you haven't had a beer mat. I'll grab some off Andy and I'll bring them round in the week, maybe something like that. Or I'll take you for a beer. How's that? You don't? No, let's not go there.
No, we can go there. It's fine.
We want to know about you. Is the best thing for me to ask you to tell us a bit about Novo, or do you want us to watch the video first?
I think watch the video first.
Great.
Yeah,
so here's a video about the work of Novo Community in Bolivia in South America. It's great.
Me vino por los problemas que no podía resolverlos. Y hay veces uno necesita a alguien que lo escuche, que le comprenda, pero no había esa oportunidad, que una confianza de una persona a quien le puede decir, bueno, estoy mal, y qué es lo que hace uno, siente un rechazo, ¿no?
Es un lugar seguro, un lugar sano, un lugar de donde una persona tiene una ayuda profunda. Novo es una familia diferente, pero es un lugar de donde hay amor.
Nosotros valoramos al ser humano como ser humano que simplemente tiene un problema de adicción por ciertas circunstancias que pasaron en la vida y que los llevó a tomar esas decisiones equivocadas, pero que se pueden rectificar con el amor de Dios, con el poder de Dios, pero también con la predisposición del equipo y la predisposición de ellos para salir adelante.
Todo estará bien. Todo estará bien. Con Dios en la familia.
Lo que nosotros buscamos es apoyar a personas que tengan el deseo de recuperar su salud. Nosotros tenemos la responsabilidad de brindarle todas las herramientas que sabemos que tienen mayor probabilidad de que funcionen, y hemos estado siempre buscando perfeccionar nuestro programa. Tenemos un compromiso yo lo veo así, de siempre brindar lo mejor, un servicio de excelencia.
Al final de ese túnel siempre hay una luz que lo ilumina a uno, ¿no? Y eso es lo que he encontrado en este centro. Ahí me han enseñado a valorarme a mí mismo.
Cuando hay perdón, esas heridas del alma son sanadas, y nosotros reforzamos en la parte espiritual donde entendemos y le hacemos conocer a la persona que con Dios todo es posible.
Ya aquí me sentí amado, ¿no? Amado, lo que siempre se busca en una familia.
Una persona puede encontrar un amor incondicional, un apoyo práctico, un lugar de donde pueden encontrar el Señor Jesucristo.
Uno siempre lo recuerda, ¿no? Con amor, porque uno lo hacen sentir que hay alguien quien te ama.
Good, isn't it? If you feel like giving that a clap, you can do. So we're going to have a chat today to find out a bit more about the work and how the Lord is using what you're doing. And I just encourage you, let's all stay open. Do you know? You might think, oh, I'm not that interested in that's going on in Bolivia. You might be by the end. But even if you were less interested, just be aware of what God might say to you through Andy's words, through my words, what you might be thinking in response to what you hear. Yeah? So tell us, what is Novo Communities? We've got a good sense from the video, but
and thank you. It was really just fantastic to have this opportunity. I'm particularly conscious of Wendy there, who kind of created this bridge to you guys, all the way from sort of Bolivia to here. What is Novo? Basically, you've got a snapshot of it there on the film, and if some of you, there's subtitles there, so I know for some that will have been really difficult to read from a distance and with the light. All of that is on our website, so if you get a chance, check it out later. What we do is, the focus is bringing new life to individuals, peace to families, and hope to communities who've been ravaged by addiction. How do we do that? We empower God's people in developing nations to launch sustainable and effective transformational communities. So to put that in really simple terms, we start rehabs in the developing world.
Yes.
Thus far, we've started a rehab. And even as I say we start rehabs, I personally am kind of caught between a bit of a tension between our vision, our dream, and sort of the realities and the challenges of actually like making it happen.
Yeah.
So right now we're in Bolivia, and a bit later on I'll tell you a bit about what's coming next in terms of a new place.
Great. And how did you come to be for you personally, how did you come to be in Bolivia in the first place? What's your story there?
Yeah. So as a family, my wife Mickey's in the back there with our youngest Mia, and there's Phoebe here, JJ, and then there's a Jemima and a Daniel who are elsewhere. Daniel's 20, Jemima's 16. As a family, we were down in Bolivia in between 06 and 09.
Okay.
That's when we met Wendy. And I was pastoring, more or less, an international church down there in a place called Santa Cruz, the city where what you saw on the screen is based. I say barely because honestly I don't know why the church took a punt on me back then, but they did. And it was a wonderful place to cut my teeth and to sort of grow in confidence. So we were down there, and as part of trying to learn Spanish, I got involved with a home for street teenagers.
Okay.
So in Santa Cruz there's a drainage canal network, and that's where the homeless often gravitate. Including children, as in so many parts of the world. And I got involved with a ministry called Operation Restoration, who have run a residential home for teenagers coming out of that situation, one for girls and one for boys. And it was really, very long story short, I got involved, and there was just this sense for me of seeing the power of Christian community as a place for healing and restoration. And asking myself, okay, what's being done for adults in addiction? There's loads more to it than that. But that's really where the seeds were planted. We explored the possibility back then of doing something and seeing what else was also being done, because of course there's always something else being done. We actually ended up back in the UK, and I worked at a place called Yeldor Manor over near to Reading for 5 years. It's a well-established, well-known drug rehab here in the UK with a Christian ethos. So we got there, we wondered, what we figured we'd come back to England for good. That's the truth of it. We sold everything up in Bolivia, and then in the middle of all of that, God dropped this thought of, actually I want you to go back to Bolivia, but I want to equip you and get you ready before you go back. So in 2015, we moved as a family to Santa Cruz.
So that's remarkable in itself, isn't it? How do you have that conversation where you say to your wife, or maybe she says to you, or together you say, oh, I think actually maybe God wants us all the way over there. Yeah. There's some people who need us there, and that's where he wants us to serve. How do you process that? How do you make such a big decision?
That's a great question. I don't know, and I think for each of us, there's this process of the more you know of God, the more you kind of trust him to guide your steps, and you open up, I think, your hand to his leadership. And so I guess it was a process, you know. There was this moment, I could tell you exactly where it was and how it happened, where the light went on. But then it was actually a 2-year process of really saying, okay, is that really you, God? And then stepping forward. But I think underneath it is that confidence that, you know, God loves us, God cares for us, God's with us as we sometimes step into the unknown.
And I guess then there might be some of us here sat with something like that in their heart or in their hand, not quite sure, still asking, is it God?
And I'm jumping in because this is last week I was sort of talking in a home church on sort of that idea, and the thing one of the final things I left with the church was just this sense of, if there is something, talk to someone about it.
Yeah.
Because I think we need to kind of get light and moisture on these little seedlings that are there sometimes, and it's always such a step-by-step process. But yeah.
So doing that in community, aware that the Spirit of God is in work in our relationships as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great. You mentioned needing to learn Spanish. I'm very impressed. I know no Spanish though.
That's why you're impressed.
Yeah. So who are the Spanish speakers here? Was he any good? Wendy said perfect.
She's been very generous.
Kez just gave me a sort of...
Oh, I can go through the errors. Far from.
So I mean, addiction. I mean, I don't know if some of us maybe have got addicts in our families or our neighbours, or we know the story of different addicts. And my goodness, well, maybe we've seen it on film. It just feels pretty hopeless often. Tell us what works, or why does it work, or can God really come into that situation? Can God really touch addicts? Can God really bring healing and wholeness there?
Yeah, I'm not one for the simple answer.
Great.
Yeah, it's challenging. I think the reality is addiction is really, really, really challenging. I think God can, and I've seen it, and many of you will have seen it, God can break into the darkest situations, no doubt. But does that mean it's easy? No. And I always sort of, it's a silly point really, but I always think it's interesting we got a special word to describe addiction when we could just use the word problem or even the word habit. But we don't, because it's its own thing. God can absolutely break in. I think like the difference between someone dealing with an addiction and us dealing with whatever difficult habit or sin issue that we deal with is it's different, but it's the same. And I think there's a real ability, as you look at your own experience of how do I move forward, how do I become healthier, how do I leave things behind me that are perhaps not healthy, there are certain things that really help. But in the end, it's a journey and it's a process. And I think you get these key moments in that journey, absolutely vital moments that can be transformative. And of course, you read these stories of people who just, they get zapped and suddenly they're free. And that's wonderful when it happens. But often it's much more of a process. So what we're doing, or what we're seeking to do in Bolivia, what we did at Yeld, or what I think lots of people do, is recognise there's a whole set of things going on that create the addiction, and therefore to kind of get out of addiction, there's a whole set of things in play. There are spiritual factors, there are psychological factors, there are physical factors sometimes. If you've got a severe pain issue and you develop an addiction to an opioid painkiller, it's not as simple as just stopping using your opioid painkiller. You're taking a substance that's very similar to heroin, but actually you can't just stop it because you've got pain issues. So factors like that, and then the whole social community element to it. Very often loneliness, boredom are key triggers to relapse. So what we're trying to do as best we can is to kind of address the fact that addiction comes out of the whole of a person's life and experience. Bring healing, bring wholeness, bring strategies, practical things. I often use this sort of silly analogy between Batman and Spider-Man. So Batman and Spider-Man both do incredible things. amazing things. And actually, someone who finds a way out of addiction is doing an incredible thing. That's the truth of it. And once you're in, so hard to get out. But Batman does what Batman does because he's got the tools for the job. He doesn't have any inherent superpower. He's got his Batarang in his car and all that stuff. He's got Robin by his side. You can go off on one. I won't, right? But so that's Batman. Spider-Man does what Spider-Man does because he's bitten by the spider and something changes on the inside.
Yeah, good.
And so, we're sort of trying to operate on both levels. Inner change, at the heart of that, people responding to Christ, coming to know him personally, but also, counselling, someone listening, someone guiding, and then really practical stuff. We do something towards the end of the program called a relapse prevention plan. And it's very nitty-gritty. It's very much just, where am I going to go? How am I going to respond? What's going to happen in this situation and that situation? So it's a long answer to a short question.
And I was really interested at the beginning there. You talked about the language of addiction. Why don't we use the language of problem or the language of habit or perhaps the language of sin? Because the difference between an addict and me is often their addiction is very visible. Their sin is very visible. My sin is much more polite and covered up.
Exactly.
I remember I was working with a bunch of addicts in Aberdeen, where I used to live, and we used a Celebrate Recovery program at one point, which is really basically the 12-step program. And I remember doing it thinking, I just want the whole congregation to do this, kind of, look, this is what's happened to me, these are the people I've hurt, this is how I can deal with this is how I can find healing. I mean, that message of dealing with our stuff and how we hold our stuff and what it does to us and finding healing in Jesus and finding restoration with the people around us, it's just really powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And this is geeking out now, but it's a really interesting article by a guy called Kent Dunnington about what we can learn for small groups from the 12 steps. And it's really interesting because he points out some key differences and things that just aren't possible. There's some really good stuff in there because I think that's it. Any one of us who've gotten close to people in addiction, you realise there's something there. There's an openness to God that's very powerful and a community that's really quite forceful. Yeah,
brilliant. We can learn from that. Yeah. Can you tell us maybe about some of the individuals you've seen? You've got to know some of the things that have happened to them. Yeah.
There's a picture, there's the photo I think we got available. You can't see it very, very well. This is just a sort of selection of some of our I say recent graduates, some of our graduates from over the years. So top left is a guy called Ronald. He came to us, severe addiction, struggling, marriage, a disaster. And it was really interesting. A key moment for him happened, and this is this thing, it's about lots of stuff and then these key moments. A key moment for him happened in the kitchen, facing up to the fact that he needed to do, the women in the room are going to roll their eyes, he had to do washing up and cooking, and he just didn't feel like that was really what he should be doing as a proud Bolivian man. It's a silly little thing, but this is part of the whole community dynamic. The reason there's a need for residential settings is partly because, again, once the nails go in on the addiction, to get out, you need a space, you need protection, but also because lots of good things happen in the hustle and bustle of sort of community life. So for Ronald, it was actually a key moment. And then actually, so our director, David, who you met on the screen there, he talks about Ronald coming into his office and just bawling his eyes out. Separate occasion, just broken, and hopeless, actually, and expressing that hopelessness. But yeah, Ronald's doing well. He graduated in 2020. He sells healthcare products.
Okay.
I'll be honest, he's offered me a couple of times these products. He goes around the country selling stuff. I'm not entirely sure about it all, to be honest, but he's making a living, looking after his family. Ricardo there, he graduated fairly recently, 6 months ago. He works in a family real estate business. Again, just came to us in a really difficult... Everyone comes out of the same story, you know. It's family falling apart, job gone, addiction in just the place of absolute supremacy in life. So yeah, Rodolfo there getting baptized. We lost contact with him, but quite recently found out he works up in Beni in a farm right on the frontier, on the border with Brazil.
Okay.
Again, yeah, he graduated like 2018, I think he left us. So yeah, that's the kind of it's interesting. We have a blend of people who come in. Some are individuals who come from families, and actually what we see is the success tends to follow those who've already got. We talk about something called recovery capital. Recovery capital is capital that helps you in recovery. So it might be, training in something, the capacity to get a job, etc., etc. Family and relationships is one of the key ones. We also have guys who come to us from the streets, from the canals, and the journey for them is much, much harder. There's a guy who we're just at the minute raising money for. On our Facebook page, you see a video. There's another one coming soon. A guy called Benigno, who came to us, grew up on the streets, literally just ended up, I don't know quite how it happened, but he just ended up alone on the streets one day, not knowing what was happening. He's got some cognitive issues. He came to us with tuberculosis. And if you look at this guy, you just think, there's just no, there's really not a lot of hope here. He's still doing well. And it's interesting what it demonstrates as well is the partnership between something like Novo and the local church, both on sort of this side and that side. So he was sort of taken care of and reached out to by a local church who brought him to us. He stayed with us much longer than would be normal. Then he went back to that local church and he's cared for by the church family.
So where he hasn't got that capital you were talking about, in his own family or in his own background, the church can step in and become that
Precisely, exactly. And again, it's really interesting. Lots of places like ours, you tend to think about you as the centre point of everyone's story. So, Rodolfo came and then he left and now he's doing this, which is one way of looking at it. Something I really try to do is flip it around and say, where do we fit in their story? Great. There's guys who come to us and they've done rehab 3 times before. They've got a good family, got a great church, and they do really well. It's really easy to claim that as our success when the truth is we came in at the right moment into a good situation. There's other people who, guys who come to us 18 years of age. It's really early. They haven't got a lot. And they come to us and it doesn't go so well. It's really important for us that we recognise, wait a second, we're in their story. We're the next kind of help forward. And I think, that's God's goodness and love, isn't it? And that there's just grace after grace after grace. And there's this journey that he leads us on.
I really like that. And thinking about for all of us as well, the people that we are close to at the moment, maybe the people we're praying for at the moment. That's a really helpful way of thinking. How are we the next step in what God is already doing in them? It doesn't all depend upon us. He's already at work in them, but we get to step in and take part and keep in step with what he's doing. Yeah, great. When we gather together on Sundays and also individually in our homes, we love the Bible. We love reading the Bible. How does this relate to what we read in the Bible, or what kind of passages do you find that really speak to what you're doing or encourage you or have shaped what you're doing?
Yeah, I've just flipped my phone open so I can read it. There's 2 things. The Psalms are full of just helpful stuff for normal life, aren't they?
Yeah.
And there's Psalm 147 verses 3 to 4 just recently has been a real kind of focus for me because it's got 2 sides to it. It says, He, talking about God, heals the brokenhearted and he bandages their wounds. He counts the stars and calls them all by name. He heals the brokenhearted, bandages their wounds. He counts the stars and calls them by name. I love the balance of that. I think doing what we're doing, there's that reminder that his heart is for those who are really struggling. And that's the truth of it. No one ends up in addiction because everything's great. Again, every story is so different, but it's a place of hurt and brokenness, that causes a lot of hurt and brokenness oftentimes, and really it can involve a lot of selfishness and destructive behaviour. But at the heart, you've got someone who's really hurting, and that's God's heart is for that person. And that idea of, like, again, healing the heart, but also bandaging the wounds, and that's a slightly different dynamic. But I love the fact that also, and sort of looking at it more at an organisational level, that our God is the one who counts the stars. He's big, he's powerful, he's all the omnis, you know, and that's an encouragement too. I guess the prodigal son, which we read earlier, is just always so helpful. And it's funny, something jumped out at me as we read it just now that, it is interesting. It said twice, I think, in what we read, it said, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. You know, the prodigal has done all his stuff, he comes back, he says, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And then what do you get? You get that incredible embrace and welcome, and you get the son returned to his place in the family, a party, the ring, the cloak, all of it is super rich in significance. And I think, again, the addict is very often the person who they might not show it, they might do an awful lot to make sure you don't see it, but they feel ashamed, they feel very unworthy. And so what we're trying to do is to just express, you know, love and acceptance. And I'd hope, if and when you visit Novo in Bolivia, I'd hope you'd be like, oh, this is such a normal, natural, relaxed environment. Because that's what we're trying to create, you know, something where men, women too, one day, hopefully, feel genuine love and acceptance.
So that the parable that Jesus told of the father welcoming this son who'd gone off and lost his way in all sorts of different ways. Jesus told the story, and it's about God's love that embraces us in our waywardness and our brokenness and our hurt. But you feel like you can totally express that love yourself. You're carriers of the Father's love for those broken men, or
a bit of both, isn't it? I think it's I think we seek to. You want to express it. You want to carry it. You also want to signpost people to the true source. You know, and again, I can't get away from the fact that the men I know, the women I know who are successful in recovery tend to have a really good relationship with God. It's not the only way, of course it's not. The stats suggest otherwise. And obviously our own experience shapes us. I know lots of people who've been involved in Christian rehabs. But it's funny, there seems to be some relationship between a deep relationship with God and a committed relationship with God and a practical kind of success, as it were, in the outworking of it. Yeah. So it's both and.
Wonderful. And it's great to hear what you're doing now and some of the story, but looking forward, what do you feel like God's doing in you now? You already mentioned maybe an expansion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so actually we are, as a family at the minute, we're living out of suitcases, and we left Bolivia on whenever that was, a couple of months ago, and we actually returned to Nicaragua, not to Bolivia. So over the last 12 months with the trustees of the charity and et cetera, we've been kind of really exploring whether now is the time to take a step of faith forward and seek to sort of see Novo established in another context. Long story why Nicaragua, but at the heart of that is a very strong potential for a partnership with another organisation called Quien Soy Yo, which means who am I? And it's an organisation locally there that works with men on the streets, it works in the prison, and they've got a long-term vision to start a residential project.
Great.
So that's sort of what we've really been looking for, is where is there this pull, someone saying, can you come and help us? And that's sort of our heart, it is our heart, it's not sort of, it's absolutely our heart, is this empowerment aspect, getting behind people, encouraging and helping people who are already there with the vision, and just giving them that bit of additional support.
Which is very similar to what you said already, isn't it? That rather than you being the centre of the story, you're the next part in the story for some of these people and some of these organisations too.
Exactly.
Great. So as you go, we'll pray about that. What else should we be praying for you and for Novo at the moment? What are the specific things that...
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the whole step forward into Nicaragua, we need to be led clearly by God. We need, wisdom, connections. When we went to Bolivia, we'd already got a 3.5 year kind of experience there, so we knew a lot of people. This is brand new. I think in terms of, we will leave a project in Bolivia, in the leadership of the national team. That's been a very gradual process, but there's always a sense that the enemy kind of tries to come into moments where you've got a change like that happening. So I think protection over the work in Bolivia is really important. Inevitably, finance is a huge element of what we're doing. We've got big expenses as a family as we move. Novo's stepping into a season where our outgoings are going up. So I think 3 things there at least. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Actually, and in that, can I just highlight the coasters?
Yeah.
Just because I'm really conscious, it's one of the best things for us is just to maintain a connection with anyone who's got any interest in the work. So on that, there's 2 sides to that coaster. I guess we're going to talk about the black side in a second.
We'll do in a sec, yeah.
Don't worry about the black side. But on the other side is our website for Novo Communities. And you can go on there and you can read our latest news. You can sign up to get news. There's a subscribe button at the bottom. It's a little bit hard to find, but it's there. You can obviously see how to give and such as well. And also, I guess as a family, we kind of share our news in a slightly different way. So I don't know whether through yourself or Wendy, if anyone's interested in hearing more and staying in touch, we can set that up.
Yeah, so you could let us know in the church office and we'll pass that on. Yeah, great. So the other thought I had was, we're here in Devon. It's very beautiful, especially when the sun's out. Lots of us have lived in Devon for a long time. What might we miss about the world that you've experienced and seen? Our church world might be relatively small compared to your experience. What might you know? What might you have seen or have heard from God, or think that we might be missing in our little, relatively safe place?
It's a really tricky question.
It's not an easy question, sorry.
It's difficult, and I'll be honest. If I lived in Devon, I probably wouldn't have left, to be honest. So I don't. In some ways, it's all the same issues. Everyone is dealing with the same stuff.
Okay.
Anxiety, economic issues, family breakdown and difficult. In some ways, it's so similar. People are people, and God's God, and it's all the same stuff. I guess an interesting. I think I become more and more aware. It's a bit of a bleak comment, really, but just how our experience in the West is not the norm.
Okay.
The legal system in Bolivia is so broken you wouldn't believe it. It's not even broken. That's not the right word. It's just not there. We have the main courthouse is called the Palacio de Justicia, the Justice Palace. It's the palace of injustice. It's unbelievable. So just a thing like that, which makes our lives. People mess with the law here, and there's corruption, but there's a true north, basically, which we all trust in. Just there's things like that we've got to be really grateful for.
Yeah,
the NHS. Oh my goodness! When you're alongside people who've got things that need doing, medical problems that they can't. So I think I often feel, gosh, we're so blessed and we're so grateful. So I guess that's just one comment. Just there's a lot of things we can be really thankful for that aren't the norm. I think we're probably in a 10 or 15%, or I don't know, maybe whatever it is. It's a minority. The other thing, I guess, is around, as you pray for the church elsewhere in the world, certainly speaking of Bolivia, there's a phrase, I don't know who said it, but it might be John Stott talked about the church being a mile wide but an inch deep in much of the world. And I think it might be a little strong to put it that way, but I think certainly in Bolivia, there's some brilliant godly people. With the team you saw on that, I can't tell you how capable and good they are. But as a whole, you step back at the church, and I think the church runs in narrow channels. It hasn't really burst the banks.
Okay.
And so I think what we see here in terms of our justice system, in terms of the way we do education, in terms of the way people treat one another, it's because the church at different points in history has really burst its banks and infiltrated society as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think even in places like Bolivia, where there's actually quite a lot of evangelical Christians, I guess a really significant prayer is that there might be something that it seeps into what feels like an impossible situation. You know, God's Spirit moves and structures change. Yeah.
That's really good. I mean, I don't mean all the other things you said weren't good, but isn't that really good? I feel like I want to put over the door, go and burst some banks, so that we see it every week when we leave. Yeah, that's great. Coasters. I said beer mats. I'm sorry.
No, they are beer mats. They
Okay,
came from a company called Thirsties who produce beer mats.
Great. You do beer mats, but you do something else which we're going to like because it involves motorbikes.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about this and introduce this video?
Yeah.
Yeah, will do. I noticed on the way into town a motorcycle cafe.
Yeah.
I need to talk to whoever's got the best in with the motorcycle cafe. I thought,
They'll take you down after, really.
Really, seriously.
Yeah.
So basically, a number of years ago, before the pandemic, we bought actually a motorcycle tour company that runs tours of Bolivia by motorcycle for international tourists. And the idea is to have a business that generates profit, all of which goes to support the charity. I don't know where we'd be if there hadn't been a pandemic, but because there's been a pandemic, you know, it has not yet been able to do that. But we're really now in a phase where you think, you know what, it's possible. You know, we've got all sorts of potential things going on. Honestly, as you pray for us, if you're into motorbikes, pray for Novo Adventures. Because it could be a game changer. It could be a game changer in Central America as well. Basically, we're looking to see tourists come down and basically have the most fun you can supporting a charity.
Great.
So you do a tour, the money goes to Novo, off we go.
Just a quick show of hands. Who's up for that or thinks they know somebody who'll be up for that? Yeah, well, we all know Mark. That's the truth of it. But I think there are others too. Great. So Andy and his family are staying for lunch, so lots of chance. I hope it's okay to grill you over lunch and stuff. Find out a bit more. Any questions you've got, come and ask them. Let's have a look at this video, but should we give them a little cheer first? That'd be a good thing to do.
Yes. Thank you.
Novo Adventures is a social enterprise based in Bolivia, the heart of South America, providing adventure motorcycle tours. Imagine yourself riding a motorcycle on a massive plain of pure salt, or navigating the twists and turns of the infamous Death Road. These are just a taste of all the adventures Bolivia has to offer. 100% of our profits are donated to our sister charity, Novo Communities. Our vision is to create drug and alcohol rehabilitative communities across the developing world, along with income-generating businesses to help these centers move from donation-based charity models to a replicable, self-sustaining community expanded upon across Bolivia and the developing world. We love Bolivia, the incredible terrain, the people, the culture, and enjoy helping people to discover it for themselves. We also love motorcycles and adventure, and want our clients to have the best experience possible in Bolivia, while also being secure, knowing their adventure holiday is helping those in need. Bolivia is a country like no other, begging to be explored, with jaw-dropping scenery and awe-inspiring roads. Join us on the trip of a lifetime.